Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of this week's Big Guy Fantasy Sports and the Fantasy Football Consistency Show. I almost said the Fantasy Football Expo podcast because that's what I've been doing every other night. But damn it, we're getting back into fantasy football. That's why this guy's here. Ron Rigney. Uh, he, he's looking good. He's got his Expo shirt on. He's excited to be back this year officially. Still gets the shirts, regardless if it comes or not, but because he's that cool. But we're very excited to have Ron back at the Expo this year. It's going to be a great time. But Ron, we're here again this week to start talking about running backs. But before that, how's things? I know it's almost as hot here as it is in Florida, which doesn't happen often, but we're feeling the 90s and heavy humidity ourselves. Assume it's always like that down there, except for like January and February.
Which is a nice little trade-off when you're digging your car out in the morning, got to start it an hour before to de-ice it. I'm cooking steaks on a grill and it's 75. You've been down here,
Yeah.
And I get the shirts every year because I know people that are important as far as the Expo. So I got some connections, and
right.
we're doing good. It's hot, it's humid. We got about 2 days last week where we had almost 24 inches of rain. Didn't even get that with the last couple of hurricanes that came through. So we're getting rid of all
crazy.
of that. Yeah, it straight poured for 2 days straight. But yeah, man, we're getting closer and closer every week to the Expo. I've got my live Scott Fishbowl draft coming up on the 29th over in Fort Lauderdale. Headed over there. Super excited about that.
Yeah.
First one of those I'll be doing. So that's coming up pretty soon as well, man. We're right in the swing of it.
Yeah, we are. And then I go July 6th down to Cincinnati for that one. Scott Fishbowl live down there in Cincy. So God bless Scott Fish. And I forget what they're doing, 29, 26
crazy
different locations this year. Every time I think I'm doing a really cool thing with the Expo, Scott just blows it out of the water. Oh, you think that? Yeah. Expo, that's just one live event.
We're doing here, Expo. Hold my beer. Watch this.
Yeah, hold my beer while we do 26 live events. Yeah, thanks. But still, we love our boy Scott Fish, and looking forward to that coming up soon. But like you said, Expo less than 2 months away. Head spinning. We're ready to go though. We'll be there. We'll be pulling it off. But let's talk a little running backs, Ron. Last couple years, running backs, it used to be 9-10 running backs would be picked in the first round, and now it's pretty much flip-flop. I don't say it's as bad. I'm going to highlight our Fan X draft, which is Draft of Experts. Folks you guys know out there, of course, me, Ron, and Colby are in this. Mike Valverde, Mike Harmon, Tony Holmes from Fantasy Sharks. A lot of good names out there. In that one, first round, only 4 running backs, so we'll get to some of those, and 8 wide receivers, which I think is pretty normal at this time of year. Just depends on where they go. Sometimes Bruce Hall and those and Bijan go a little earlier. They went 8th and 9th or 8th and 10th in this draft. But so Ron, let's just talk about running backs. We know that, it's kind of like the old days with quarterbacks. We're waiting. The only time you're going to grab a quarterback is if all of the stud receivers are gone and you feel like you're getting a stud running back in a Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson. Of course, McCaffrey's going number 1, which you picked in that draft. You had the first pick. You took CMC with no hesitation, and I certainly don't blame you. I'll probably be doing the same thing. But we all know what happens when CMC is the number 1 pick, don't we? So let's hope that, and then you put him on the cover of Madden this year. Talk about a double jinx, right? It's just like, oh, man, come on. But you have to make that pick. If he stays, even if he misses a couple games, you're talking about just an absolute stud running back. There's no reason for him to be slowing down much. So, Ron, as you look at this first round, the 4 running backs that went in this one, McCaffrey at 1, Breece Hall at 8, 9 went Saquon Barkley, which is a little sooner than I've seen him, and Bijan Robinson went number 10. Now, ADP, according to NFFC, which is where the big money spenders are, that has Breece Hall going second, of course, overall as a running back, but 4th pick overall, Bijan at the 6th pick, and then only other one that is in the ADP of first round is Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm not that high on Gibbs as others just because of David Montgomery being there.
Mm-hmm.
But what are your thoughts about these top 4-ish guys that are going first, early second round? I mean, how are you feeling? What order do you like outside of McCaffrey going first? What is your thoughts on those next 3 or 4?
I mean, with McCaffrey, like you said, I took him at number 1. I looked at CD Lamb, and I thought, maybe I would get a little cute there, but you can definitely make a case for it. But I don't know if I just feel like living dangerously this year. But the only other time I've ever had Christian McCaffrey, he was hurt. The Madden curse of death as well. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But I think when you have that number 1 overall pick, when you see what Christian McCaffrey is able to do, and the main thing was he was able to string together a healthy season. And they have a lot of national televised games, and we know he is good, but I never really understood how good he exactly is until you watch how hard that guy runs. And the thing about it is, him going to San Francisco, him in that offense, I wrote that up in my analysis on FanX, with the offense they run out there and the other weapons they have, those other weapons help him out because it takes a little bit of the pressure off him. But the guy still averaged over 5 yards a carry, still scored over 20 touchdowns. I mean, he's the guy by far. And if he puts together another season like he did last year, it's going to pay off that first round capital, that first pick capital. The only thing I might do a little differently is I might kind of go with what the ADP says, and I might flip Saquon behind Bijan Robinson. And I think because, you do have Breece Hall there. If you look, we talked about depth charts a lot last week with quarterbacks and receivers in relation to those quarterbacks. And it's the same thing with running back. When you look at Breece Hall, there's not a lot behind him. Dalvin Cook is no longer in the mix. Michael Carter is not there. There's not a lot behind him, and so he's going to get the bulk of the carries. He's going to catch the ball out of the backfield. Same thing with Bijan. Tyler Algier is there, but Bijan is a do-it-all, everything guy. He's only in his second year. Didn't really carry the ball a decent amount last year, but I feel like with the new coach, new offense, they're going to want to get him the ball early and often, and I think they're going to have to if they want to be able to throw the ball. It's not that I don't like Saquon. I just think that if I'm drafting him and I'm looking at these guys as far as first-round picks, I'm going to put Saquon at number 4. Again, love the weapons around him, but I think that there might be a few more guys there that need the ball. Devontae Smith is there. Of course, A.J. Brown. Of course, Jalen Hurts as well. If they're still doing the tush push, a lot of those touchdowns may not be there on the goal line. So I think that's the only change I would make, but I think you can make a pretty strong case, especially in a league that's this deep, that those 4 guys belong in the first round for sure.
Yeah. So, I have Breece Hall number 2. I actually have Jonathan Taylor number 3 overall ahead of Bijan, which, I know you're happy about because you're a Colts fan, but I just feel like, it's going to be close. And I wouldn't be surprised if Bijan beats Jonathan Taylor in total points. But it's that consistency that Taylor brings. I mean, he missed a bunch of games last year, but in those 10 games he played, he was 90% consistent. Bijan was 76. Obviously, we need Taylor to stay on the field, and that's big. That's a big plus. But I actually have Derrick Henry 5th on my list, and I didn't have him that high early, but I keep reading so many things coming out of camp, coming out of his mouth, coming out of the coach's mouth that they want to feed this guy till he falls over. I feel like he's got a chip on his shoulder coming out of Tennessee. Like after he got hurt last year, like people are like, oh, he's done. He's washed up, blah, blah, blah. But he's going to a team that's going to win games, and he's going to help them win games. That didn't happen in Tennessee for the last 4 or 5 years. And so I feel like just looks like he has that tenacity or whatever you want to call it to go out and prove something. And because of that, I've moved him up because, like you said, Saquon Barkley, if Jalen Hurts isn't, getting 14, 15 rushing touchdowns from the 1 yard line, if I knew that wasn't going to happen and Barkley was going to even get half of those, I would be like, okay, Barkley's got a good case too. But I just feel like that's not going to go away. Maybe it will. We'll see. But if I had to choose, I'm going McCaffrey, Hall, Taylor, Bijan, then Derrick Henry, then Barkley as my basically top 6 there. Top 6. Again, everybody's order is going to be a little bit different. The interesting thing is Henry, at least right now in NFFC, is going as the 11th running back off the board at pick 30. Now, in our draft, the FanX draft, Henry went as the 10th quarterback or 10th running back, which is close to the 11th in the ADP, but he did not go 20th. He went like, 18th, 19th, maybe 20th, but not 30th. That's for sure. If you had fallen to you at the end of round 2, which had been pick 24, would you have taken him to go with McCaffrey instead of Diggs?
And that's Derrick Henry you're talking
Yeah.
about? I mean, here's a couple things that I just learned about Derrick Henry, and you kind of talked me into him as well. And I kind of feel like Derrick Henry is like a Frank Gore type. I feel like he could be 45 years old and go out and put up 1,000-yard season if he needed to, you know? And I didn't know this either because I didn't have Derrick Henry any share of him last year. Dude put up the quietest 1,167-yard, 12-touchdown season ever last year. Who would have known that? And like you said, he just kind of wasted away in Tennessee. But it's one of those signings with the Steelers. I feel like it just makes sense. You know what I mean? It makes sense that he does this. It makes it, he's there with Lamar and they got a few guys to sling it around with. But like you said, they want to hand it to him early and often. And I think it's a solid match there. And especially with the 12 touchdowns, with the 1,167 yards, the guy's still got it. The guy's not falling off the cliff just yet. It could come, but not really showing signs of it. But I mean, that would have been a solid 1-2 punch there. But man, I feel like, like you said, some of the things you said there, getting him at pick 30 is almost just ridiculous as far as what we think's going on.
Yeah,
and you see the dude work in the off season too. Works his behind off, and you see it. Dude's 250 pounds, so he's a tank. He's always, he's always that guy on the goal line. It could be scary.
After that group, that's when I get a little edgy about the next wave. And granted, these are picks, this is number 7 through 14. Let's say 7. Let's just do 7 through 12. We'll stay with the running back ones. Now, I have them ranked at this order: Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Etienne, Rachaad White, Isaiah Pacheco, and Devin Achane, and James Cook. I could pass on all of them and I'd be okay with it and grab wide receivers. But that's where they're going. And the guys behind them that are your like RB2As are players that are up in years or, don't have the perfect scenario in their backfield, or they change teams like Mixon, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, those kind of guys. How are you feeling about that 7 through 12 there of Gibbs, Etienne, White, Pacheco, Achane, and Cook? If there's one that I like, I'd probably pick Rachaad White just because I feel like, well, he's all they've got. I mean, and they used him quite a bit. I mean, he was 4th in total points last year, 7th in consistency. It's hard to argue with those numbers, and there isn't much of a change in Tampa Bay. But if you saw, I took Achane as my second running back in this league because he was available in round 4, and he's going in the top 10, in most ADPs. So I'm like, well, I guess I'll take a shot. Now, I took David Montgomery 2 rounds later because I didn't feel all that comfortable with Achane as my number 2, which I should, I guess, if he could stay healthy, but that's the key. What are your thoughts on that group? Because that group to me is just kind of like, we could argue all day of why you should pick them and why you might not want to pick them.
Most of them, I'm just kind of meh. They're there,
right. Isn't it? Which is sad for 7 through 12.
There are a lot of kind of the same. I don't want to say the same style of running back, but from a fantasy standpoint, just I'm expecting kind of the same stats. And I would say I like Rachaad White there. I like Isaiah Pacheco a little bit too. That's another guy that if you watch him, dude runs hard. There's not. I mean, they got a couple gadget guys in the backfield there. But I don't want to give away too much of my FanX draft because we're going to talk about those next week. But I went McCaffrey number 1 overall. So what that allowed me to do is maybe wait a little bit longer on the second running back. So I went 3 straight receivers And then I went to round 5. I won't give away who I talked about because we'll talk about him in that second group. But
Yeah.
another guy that I would say normally, a guy that helped me to my Kings Classic championship last year was James Cook, and I got him nice ADP. It was more, I want to say it was somewhere
Yeah.
around 60 something. He shot up a little bit, and rightfully so. Had a
Right.
nice season, but he's going to have to run the ball a little bit. But the thing I don't like about that is they drafted a kid named Ray Davis that you need to keep an eye on that I think might get some opportunities as well. A little bit different style of a runner. So that scares me a little bit. But, I think that if there's some receivers sitting there, I think you got to add those receivers all day long over those guys because I feel like the two guys I got next, as far as running backs, can put up some similar stats to those guys that you just named off.
Yeah, I think, and that's a thing too. And so, after you look at that group and you're like, then the next group is more veteran type players that have proven themselves worthy, but have some issues. So let's look at 13 through 17. Kenneth Walker, David Montgomery, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs. All have been solid backs. I mean, Montgomery, 4th in consistency last year, missed a few games, but 86%. And I drafted him in our FanX draft in round 6 because I'm like, this guy was 86% consistent last year. He gets the touchdowns. I just couldn't pass that up at that point because I'm like, after that, it was like, oh, you're looking at, Raheem Mostert's, Devin Singletary's, those kind of things. So I'm like, well, let's just grab him now. But out of that group, I've heard some great things about Kamara and the new running scheme that he's got there. Of course, he gets a ton of checkdowns. He was 5th in consistency, 85%, right behind Montgomery, 12th in total points, and he still missed 4 games. So, again, if he can stay healthy with Captain Check down there as Derek Carr, I do like him, but no reason not to like Joe Mixon in Houston in that offense. Josh Jacobs went to, God, where did he go to? I went brain dead.
Green Bay,
right?
Mm-hmm.
So he changed teams, but now he's running not in the dome all the time. He'll be up in the beautiful weather of Wisconsin, so that could affect him some, but he didn't stay healthy last year. So again, in this group, do you feel good about any of these guys, depending on where you draft them, obviously? Then their ADPs are out there like 50, 69, 44th, 49th. I mean, they're around 5, 6-ish, which I'm okay with. Again, I drafted Montgomery in round 6, so it was good. What are your thoughts on that group?
Honestly, I like that group a little less than the guys behind him just because I like the value of those guys behind him. Like I said,
Right.
I'll talk about the guys that I took here in a second, and it was
Yeah.
none of these guys that are 13 to 17 on that list you got there. I don't mind Josh Jacobs up there, but like you said, kind of unproven as far as running, in that cold climate up there. But Kamara's got some question marks too. The contract, there could be a holdout. There could be. He's always a guy that there could be some discipline coming from. You never know what he's capable of.
Right.
I just don't feel like I'd say my favorite guy out of there is probably Mixon, just because he's going to be the guy instead of Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce was a huge disappointment last year. They had Devin Singletary, who was okay, but I think Mixon is definitely an upgrade. But I'd say with the ADP, with the situation, Mixon's probably my favorite guy there. But I'm still going to wait on this. Probably this next group is where I'm going to take my RB2 and then my RB3 flex.
Right, because as you said, in that FanX draft, you went 3 straight receivers, and a lot of these guys went in those 3 rounds that you picked them. So totally understand, where you were going with this. Now, the next group starts with my 18th running back, who right now is ADP is RB7. So you can see that I'm not feeling Kyren Williams. And I think it's just what I've seen in the Rams offense the last few years is that you can't trust who was hot last year because it can be replaced very quickly. Kyren certainly proved he was very good. He was 6th in consistency. 7th in total points, even though he missed 5 games. But yet I can't put him high enough to above these other guys because I don't know. I just don't have that feeling that he can do it again. Or if he struggles even a little bit, that the Rams will just put whoever they got in the backfield be out there. And so that's number 18. 19th, we've got Najee Harris, Aaron Jones at 20, DeAndre Swift at 21, Pollard at 22, Ramondre Stevenson 23, James Conner 24. These are all guys that I'm okay if I get them as my RB3, but I don't know if I want them as my RB2, even though they're all ranked in 18 through 24. So I know this is where your one guy is. Talk about why you like him as compared to maybe some of the other folks.
Well, and the other thing real quick, too, with the Rams, they took Blake Corum out of Michigan, too, guy that just won the national championship.
I knew there was somebody. I'm like, I couldn't think. Yeah. I knew it was a rookie, and I couldn't remember which one, but yeah.
Not a burner, but a guy that just good field vision, waits on that block, just a Jim Harbaugh guy, well coached. So I think that might cut into a little bit of Kyron Williams' time as well. But like you said, I went McCaffrey number 1, went 3 straight receivers. Round 5, went with Ramondre Stevenson. You mentioned him there, coming off an injury. Zeke Elliott is out of town. There's really not a lot behind him in that backfield. They're rolling with Drake May at quarterback. There's not a lot of weapons to throw to. There's just not a lot to like about that offense. And where I got him for my RB2, my low RB2, feel pretty good about that. Reading a lot of nice stuff about him. I believe it's a contract year for him as well. Yeah. So that adds to it a little bit. Says he's looked good so far in the workouts. And I think that, that could be coach speak. It could be whatever. But I feel like that's pretty solid right there where I got him in round 5 as one of those lower end RB2s. Because, again, I don't mind some of those guys ahead of him, but just felt like I could get something similar if I waited a little bit. And the other guy you mentioned there, DeAndre Swift, got him in round 7. Went with my quarterback in round 6, Jordan Love. DeAndre Swift in round 7. They've got Khalil Herbert. They got Rashawn Johnson, who I do like. I handcuffed him later on. But I don't feel like they hand that money to DeAndre Swift if they don't want to get him the football. We've seen DeAndre Swift be able to catch a ball out of the backfield. I know it's cold there. But you got a rookie quarterback. You got great receivers on the outsides. Yeah. But he's going to be, like you said, captain check down a little bit because he is a rookie, So like that there too in round 7. So following up McCaffrey, and my depth chart goes McCaffrey, Ramondre Stevenson, and DeAndre Swift. Pretty solid after those first 7 rounds, I think.
Yeah, no, I liked your picks. Like you said, you kind of did what I did, which was take a running back, go, hey, you know what? Let's get another one here before we get too far removed from some, solid choices. The guy that I kind of like in there, and I didn't draft in this one just because I just didn't have that opportunity. And plus I already had Montgomery. Is Najee Harris. And I know that, a lot of people were down on him last year. But, he was 23rd in total points. Consistency could have been a lot better, but he was sharing a lot of carries with Jaylen Warren. So now this year, his ADP is like round 7. He's going off the board as 21, RB 21. In this draft, he went RB 25, round 7. So pretty similar, but I feel like, again, he's one of those guys with a chip on his shoulder. Didn't get his 5th-year option picked up. Steelers are like, okay, if you can prove you're good enough to stay, we'll keep you, but you got to prove it. So I always like when you got those kind of guys that have to go out and prove and earn their money. And even if he doesn't get signed by the Steelers, if he just goes out and matches, if you can do a little bit better with consistency, but even matches the total points, which was top 24, again, getting him as your running back 3 or 4, maybe not 4, but running back 3 for sure. I like him, and I think he could provide some good value in that because now you have Arthur Smith there. He loves to use multiple running backs. So I feel like there's some thunder and lightning there with him and Jaylen Warren. Neither one of them is going to be a top 20 or top, but they could be both top 24. They could end up like last year where they were 23rd and 24th. I think they were like 3 points difference between the two of them, which I thought was
similar.
Quite entertaining.
And the thing real quick about Najee Harris too is, the consistency is not where we want it to be. And I had him on my Kings Classic team last year, And there was weeks where he was a darling, and there's weeks where he didn't show up, or he scored a touchdown and it got you that clutch game. But
Yeah.
the thing that you can't deny about Najee Harris, 1,000 yards, first 3 seasons in the league, at least 7 touchdowns on the ground. But also the most important, if your guys aren't in the lineup, they're not scoring you points. He has not missed a game in his first 3 seasons. He's been dinged up a little bit, but when you look at his Pro Football Reference page, 17 games played, 17 games started, and there's not a lot of guys that can say that.
No, there's not, especially at running back. So, yeah, you're right. Definitely a grinder, definitely has a lot to prove. It would take a pretty serious injury to take him off the field this year because of that. After that, Ron, we're into the RB3s here. Again, there's some in there that are intriguing. Zach Moss as the main guy now in Cincinnati. Raheem Mostert, who was fifth in total points, third in consistency, is RB29. So that's entertaining. I actually thought about in the Fandex League getting Mostert later to match up with Achin, but somebody actually grabbed him in round 8. So basically a few rounds after me. Probably, if it would have been round 10, I probably would have grabbed Mostert just to match up as a handcuff. But certainly proved and showed that he can be very, very good fantasy wise. I certainly wouldn't have a problem taking him as a flyer as my RB4 in a deep league. He's got some potential. Another one is Nick Chubb. Now, obviously, we all love Chubb, and especially in Cleveland, he's been a stud. But massive injury last year, only played 2 games, but he's out running on the field. He's doing some stuff. There's no time frame we've heard yet. But everything I've heard him say is he wants to be back on the field as soon as possible, help this team. What that means, I don't know. I'm okay at RB35, round 10-ish, 8 or 9 or 10. What do you think? Would you take that chance on Chubb if you've got the room for it?
I think you have to pick 112. I mean, the upside is just too good. I mean, we saw what he did a couple seasons ago, and he might be a little slow out of the gate as far as them giving him the football. But I feel like just with the way these guys can rehab these injuries and the way these guys can rehab these ACLs and with the quickness they can come back with, and they can come back even stronger than they were before. Yeah, he might be a little slow first 3 weeks, but at pick 112, I mean, where else are you going to get RB1 upside? And we're talking like top RB1 upside.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a guy that was going super, super early. I mean, this is one of the reasons my auction team tanked last year was because had Nick Chubb on it and he was out immediately.
Yeah.
But
Right.
you're not going to find so many guys with that upside around here. And when you get to this point in the draft, when you're looking for your RB4, even maybe your RB5, depending on how shallow the league is, you can't pass that up because that could end up being your top guy.
Well, and somebody brought up a good point too. One of the podcasts I was on we were talking about Nick Chubb, and they said, well, if he gets put on the PUP and he misses the first 8 games, which is certainly possible, they said, well, at least you can put him on IR and pick somebody up, at least, and stash him without it costing you a bench spot. All right, that's fair. Yeah, didn't think about that. Of course, it depends on your league. I'm in some leagues where there are no IRs, so yeah, you got to be careful with that. But certainly, has some potential. Another guy that I have a little bit farther down. I mean, he had a nice end of season for the Raiders. His ADP is 24. I have him 33. Just because I don't trust the Raiders. Not saying that Zamir White won't be the starter there, but who's to know? Again, he's definitely a great late round pick if I can get him them, but I'm not sure. What are your thoughts on Zamir White? Would you take him as your RB2 or 3?
I mean, I obviously don't want him as my 2, 3.
Okay.
I'd be a little bit more okay with it because most likely you're going to probably put him in that flex spot. We talk about flex spots all the time at Kings Classic. I'd be okay there. I just feel like with Zamir White, there's been a couple of instances where he's had chances where Josh Jacobs was hurt and he's the guy and he's the hot waiver pickup for the week. and he doesn't come through. I don't know what, like I said, I'm not sure what the reason for that is. He had 4.3 yards a carry last year, which is solid. Only scored 1 touchdown. I mean, they're going to have to get in the ball. So, I mean, as your RB3, I feel a little better about it just because I think at least first few weeks, the opportunities are going to be there. We want to see Gardner Minshew succeed because we love him. Former Colt, looked good last year, but I mean, we don't know what we're getting out of him. So they may have to lean on the running game a little bit, and he's going to be that number 1 guy. So as your RB3, I think you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm looking at the FanX draft, and interestingly enough, and basically almost back-to-back picks went Zach Moss, Zamir White, James Conner. Actually, they went the opposite way. Conner first, White, then Moss, 9, 10th, and 12th in round 7. Which of those 3 would you have picked if you had those 3 sitting in front of you and you needed your RB3 at that point?
Zach Moss, because Zach Moss, as a Colts fan, if you're a Colts fan, you watched him last year.
Yeah,
he kept that team. Yeah, he kept that team afloat, and I think that's a great signing for Cincinnati. The guy has been in the league a few years, but also doesn't have a lot of the wear and tear on the tires like some of these other guys do. I think James Conner's kind of getting to the end of his road, and like I said, Zamir White's the unproven guy, but going based on the resume, I guess you could say most recent resume, I think Zach Moss is the best guy there out of those 3.
I agree. All right, one more guy that's in the RB3 categories rankings on our behalf, and that is the Gus Bus. Gus Edwards takes his touchdown only heaven for me in my one league. But he goes now to the Chargers, where they have Mr. Jim Harbaugh. They're coaching their team, who loves to run the ball a lot. But already, I don't know if you heard, all of a sudden there was an undisclosed injury and Edwards was out missing practices. Don't know why. Harbaugh didn't have an answer, just said he's fine. Undisclosed injury. A little scary. Do you have any love for the Gus Bus and hit the Chargers? I do in my touchdown only league. I'm not gonna lie, because I'm gonna keep him in that one because hey, it's touchdown only, and that's what the Gus Bus does best. But do you feel the love that is he gonna get enough touches? Can he stay healthy enough? I mean, he did play 17 games last year for the Ravens, but I feel like he was in and out. Like you said, he was one of those like have 2 touchdown games and he'd be great, and then rush for 63 yards the next week, and that was it. No touchdowns. So,
well, the first thing that jumps out about him is he went to the Chargers, and Jim Harbaugh has signed almost everybody that John Harbaugh doesn't want. It's like right. Ravens West. He's got J.K. Dobbins behind him too.
Right.
There's one guy in the Chargers that I like a lot this year where you're getting him, and it's nobody in that backfield. It's a guy we'll talk about next week that I was able to get on my team. But he doesn't catch the ball out of the backfield. That's another thing that's against him. And he does score touchdowns. Did have 13 of them, like you said. So I mean, that was a nice get for you in your touchdown only league. But in Jim Harbaugh's, he doesn't care about your fantasy team. He doesn't care about scoring you points. He's going to do what makes sense. And maybe playing Gus Edwards does not make any sense to him. We know that Jim Harbaugh is a smart guy, but he, like I said, does what he wants to do. Another guy, a guy that I might take a flyer on late just because he's still there and he showed a few flashes last year, wasn't great, was Isaiah Spiller. I mean, maybe he's a guy that he's probably free in drafts, but I'm not a big fan of anybody in that Chargers offense except one guy, and that's one of the receivers there. I'm sure you know who it is, but we'll talk about him next week.
We'll talk about him. All right, wrap this up here. Is there anybody in that RB4 later? Is there anybody we didn't talk about that you kind of like? The only one that even kind of crosses my mind is the the hype for Tajay Spears. He's ADP is 31st. I have him 45th, but mostly because of Tony Pollard, which we didn't even talk about, because Pollard is somewhere buried in my rankings. I think a little bit higher up. Oh yeah, he's at 22. They're talking about those 2 guys sharing. Pollard's probably even a little bit too high. I might have to bring him down a little bit. But anyway, that's the only one that kind of jumps out at me, but I feel like he probably gets picked. He was picked RB 34 in our draft, round 9. That's not a terrible spot. Now, interestingly enough, for that guy's team, that was his RB 2. So anyway, He picked two tight ends before he picked Tajay Spears as his RB2. Just saying. But needless to say, him or anybody else that we didn't talk about that, Devin Singletary in New York, Chuba Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks, Blake Corum, Zeke in Dallas by himself with baby Rico Dottle. I don't know.
A couple guys right around that area, a little bit beyond there that I might highlight a bit. You mentioned Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle is a guy that I was impressed with watching him last year. Caught the ball well. He had a nice little burst. Could get some more run there. Chase Brown in Cincinnati too. I mentioned Zach Moss earlier. I think he's definitely the guy. But Chase Brown came on a little bit last year. Had a couple games where he put up some nice yardage totals, scored a few touchdowns there later in the season. A nice little waiver pickup right before playoff time. I mentioned Blake Corum earlier. Guy that I drafted, I think, is my RB4, RB5. The champagne of running backs, Mr. Zach Charbonnet. Guy that he's behind Kenneth Walker on that depth chart. Showed a little bit last year. Catches the ball really well out of the backfield. I think he's going to push for that. He's going to have that third down role. And I think he's going to push for a few more touches. Not a guy that I'm expecting the world out of, but when you get to that point where you're looking for just some depth or maybe a guy that might take over for an injury, he's a guy that you might look at.
So it should be a new kind of a new offense.
Yep. So other than that, the guy I mentioned earlier, Ray Davis for Buffalo. That's a guy that I really like as a rookie. Keep an eye on him. But other than that, you won't be going much out of that realm because when I'm talking about Ray Davis, I'm gonna pick 158. So if you're picking running backs around there, you're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah. I mean, in our draft here, your Ray Davis actually went in round 14. There's some guys late, that who knows, when you get that late and you get into round 13, 14s, you're just, like you said, grasping at straws. I mean, there's some names, AJ Dillon, the Quadzilla, Chase Brown went in round 13, Chuba Hubbard went in round 12. So like you said, I actually took Antonio Gibson in round 12, just because, hey, somebody's got to catch the ball coming out of the backfield in New England, because Ramondre will be, the grunt guy. So I've heard some good things about Gibson. Figured, it's my fourth running back, so why not? So you took Roshan Johnson as well. So I mean, I just feel like there's lots of potential talent there, even as late that late. So that's what's certainly makes it nice. And if you wait and get some of these running backs, all of them have potential. One injury moves them into a starting spot, more opportunities, all kinds of stuff certainly can happen. So, Ron, thank you for being a part of this. We will certainly be back next week. We might even have Mr. Conway join us. So we'll see how that goes, but we'll be back next week. Might be talking more about the FanX draft and see what our thoughts of the draft picks. We kind of already talked about some, but we'll highlight some more as well. So, Ron, thank you for being here. So tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter, and we'll take it out.
Yeah, at Ron Rigney on the X Machine. And like I said, we got the Scott Fish coming up. We'll be talking about that coming up. Hopefully, I'll have Colby do with us next week to talk about FanX. But everybody's favorite segment, the random football card of the week. A little wild card action.
Ooh, if you guys Randall Cunningham?
Yeah, in the early 90s, this wild card set was really super weird. Came out in the early 90s, and this is one of the inserts they had. I thought it was kind of pretty. But the wild card was unique because they had this base card set where if you got a guy, they would put a little strip here with a number in the corner, and it said 100 or 10 or whatever. You could send that card in and get 10 more of the same card, which I thought was kind of a weird concept. Okay. It was kind of quirky and kind of cool. But they had this pretty little Stat Smashers insert set in there. So Randall Cunningham, if you're watching and you don't know who Randall Cunningham is, go do yourself a favor. Go play some Super Tecmo Bowl, pick the Eagles, and just run with Randall Cunningham, and you're going to see what I'm talking about. Dude was unreal. He was the Michael Vick before there was Michael Vick for sure. But go get that guide. If you missed out getting it for Dad on Father's Day, you can always make it up to Dad. Go get him one right now. Get him a ticket to the Expo. Hook him up so he wins this season. Because what better gift can you give Dad for Father's Day than a fantasy championship?
That's it. Get him a championship before he even knows he's going to get it. It can't beat that. So, all right, as Ron said, don't forget, check out Big Guy Fantasy Sports. Our articles are posting. Our videos are posting. Check all that stuff. Of course, go to the fantasyfootballexpo.com and get your tickets to the Expo. Hey, everybody's going. Why shouldn't you? So, All right. For Ron Rigney, I'm Bob Lung. Take care. God bless. And we'll see